Yep.
I can do a little bit more of that.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here today with Charlie Hobson, the flamethrower expert, and we are taking a look at one of his one-of-a-kind, the only one left in existence, Japanese Type 100 flamethrowers. So this was basically the standard Japanese flamethrower unit in World War II. Type 100 corresponds to the year of 1940. And you said this was a slight technical improvement on their previous Type 93, which would have been 1933 model.
Right.
In general, compared to, we'll just compare it to the gold standard American M2, this gun it's lighter and the machining is more complex. It doesn't really have the same safety features.
No.
And yet, it was kind of it was a lot of the inspiration for the M2.
Right. After the M1 disaster and we found out how badly we needed a flamethrower, tremendous research went into building the M2.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of guidelines they wanted. Reliability is number one, firepower number two, ease of operation number three, and there were a lot of things on the M1 that just were terribly complicated. So when these were captured and they were sent back to the factory, there was a lot of innovations that said this would be really help a lot. The ability for the operator to turn himself on.
Right. And this, I just want
to... Great idea.
I want to point this thing out.
Sure.
This is really cool. This is a metal segmented crank handle. So it connects, this is what actually shuts off or allows pressure to go to the hose and the gun, but it flops over the operator's shoulder and it's flexible, but it still works. You can still turn this handle 90 degrees opposed to the valve and it runs. I think that's a really cool little feature there.
A little complicated, but
and
the real benefit in combat.
And so it's way better than having, for example, the valve on the back where your assistant has to do it for you. But at the same time, it's easy for this thing to flop back that way, and you go to reach for it and you can't see it. So, you know, when the U.S. looked at this, they put it on a fixed amount where it was always going to be in the same place.
Right, so the operator could charge himself, and there were no other valves.
Yeah.
This one, of course, has, while you're, and we found out yesterday, while you're filling it, that has to be open, so your pressure goes up to here. If there's any problems whatsoever, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more places to leak.
Right.
So, and now it's still an assistant has to turn on the initial pressure bottle.
Right.
And then the operator's got control.
So the idea was this allows you to fill the pressure bottle. Right. And this works like the American one, where you've got 2 tanks of liquid fuel. You got 1 tank of compressed gas.
Right.
You use this to fill the gas from a larger charging station.
Right.
And then when you're ready to like head out on patrol or go, you know, from your bivouac to where you're actually fighting, you open this, put the thing on, and then that allows the pressure up to here, and when you're ready to actually shoot, that's when the operator uses this.
Right.
So you don't have to have an assistant with you. It's just, on the American one, they combined these two into one valve that the operator can all do themselves.
4 less places to leak, too.
Right.
The other thing that's not obvious right off the bat is, on the M1, we have to disconnect the whole tank right here and fill it.
Right.
And this one uses a wing nut, and so if you disconnect it here, wing nut, pull it right off, you could put another charged bottle on there.
Right.
So that's kind of nice. It gives us an option of taking it off to charge it or charging it in place. I like that.
Okay.
That's the second feature we copied.
All right. And again, we did a little better. By the final iteration of the M2, the pressure bottle was on a quick release valve. You didn't have to unthread anything.
Right. So this didn't take a wrench. You just snap, pop it off.
Right. Let's see. So total capacity on this was 2.5 to 3 gallons of fuel.
Right.
And what's interesting about this one, and this is, correct me if I have this wrong, but on this gun, there is no pressure regulator. So when you turn this valve on, all of the pressure in this tank dumps into your 2 fuel bottles, and as you fire, the pressure goes down. So your first shot's going to be the longest, and every subsequent shot's going to be a little shorter, until at the end it's just kind of going pfft.
Right. Which we saw as a disadvantage because
Right.
we've got a lot of fuel. We're going to make one shot with a gallon or half a gallon even, stop, go to another pillbox, fire again, stop, go to another. Whereas with the Japanese, I think this was designed really just to attack one pillbox.
Which makes sense with the lower fuel capacity
Right.
anyway.
Right.
What would your total firing time be? If you had this full and you just crank it open and let it go, a couple seconds?
I'd say about 5 seconds.
Okay.
Smaller nozzle, smaller reserve, but a smaller fuel capacity, but with a smaller nozzle,
You're shooting
and then the
slower.
pressure really falls down, so
Okay.
it's an average.
Okay. So I should say, when you start, this whole thing is pressurized at about 350 psi.
Right, right.
And when you get to the very end, you're at about 150 psi.
150, right.
So-
Which is still more than our M1, but
Right.
1/2, almost 1/3 of the M2.
Right. And if I remember from your book correctly, range on this is going to start at only about 30 yards.
They could, when you look at an American fire, we did have one case with the Marine Corps at Reading Air Show where we were able to fire them both at the same
cool.
time.
Okay.
And you really don't see that much difference.
Okay.
But then, hot day, liquid fuel vaporizing, pressure, actually a higher pressure doesn't go any farther. It goes shorter because it's vaporizing it too soon.
Okay. A lot of factors involved here.
Right, a lot of factors. So I would not, if this were what's available, I would not hesitate to use it.
Okay.
But not nearly as operator friendly as the M2.
Yeah, we'll get to that wand in a second.
Right.
It sounds like the tactical application of this, and you know, backtrack just a sec, it's interesting to me that different American doctrine seems to really reflect on the American marksmanship doctrine.
Yeah.
The U.S. had really focused on precision marksmanship and, for example, the issuing of shooting slings, and I can really easily see that transferring into something like a flamethrower. It would be like the idea of having a rifle where your first shot in the magazine has this trajectory, and then the last one has this short trajectory, and the American mindset is just, nope, not going to happen.
No. You want my men to shoot that machine?
Right.
You know, that kind of thing.
Whereas with something like this, even though the range is changing, if you design your tactics around it, what you described to me was the first shot at the longest range
Right.
is like an intimidation thing. The idea is to get the guys to get away from the firing ports in their bunker, maybe close the firing port.
Psychological effect.
And then, as that happens, the operator advances on the pillbox, and ultimately the goal is to get up really close and
Right.
douse fuel straight down into a vent hole or something.
Right.
And at that point, if you had an American gun at high pressure, you can't do that. Because at really close range, it's going to splash back on you.
Right.
This thing, because at that point you've dissipated a lot of the pressure, you've got this nice, well, easy kind of
Right.
vent of fuel.
You might even be able to go to 2 different firing ports because you're not worried about the recoil, say, from here to the wall, 10 feet.
Yeah.
You're not worried about it with 150 PSI, right?
Right.
It wouldn't recoil on you.
So it's interesting. I think I imagine the first U.S. officer who got one of these things and learned that would probably dismiss it as pure junk.
Right.
But I think when you look at it in a little bit of a more nuanced way, you can see, okay, that really makes sense for its specific application. And the same thing applies to the American gun.
Right.
So, let's see. One of the things that the Army noted about this was, and in fact you told me too, from
Right.
experimenting with it, is it's a much more comfortable piece. It's like 45 pounds on your back instead of
Right.
80.
Wider straps, more comfortable strap, more adjustable.
Okay. And you said you can run with this thing. You
Right.
strap it on, tighten it up,
Yeah.
and it doesn't bounce around much.
Right.
So that's a cool feature to it.
Right.
And we didn't point out, it does have a blowout valve.
Right.
Just like
It's got
American
actually
ones.
2 of them, but my feeling is if you filled it off the bottle, you need that safety valve.
Okay.
And it basically, if you go to too high a pressure, rather than just blow up, the valve bursts.
Okay.
Same thing up here. If you overcharge this, if you filled it up too high, you're going to go to 450. If
Right.
these are only tested at 6,
Okay.
and they've been rusting a little bit, banged around on the field, you're getting kind of dangerous.
Okay.
I'd rather see this relieve at, 350, 400. And we can always fix that. We can't re-weld these.
Yeah, or peel them out of your back after it blows up on you.
Yeah, the Japanese soldier didn't mind if it was in combat if he went to meet his ancestors.
Okay.
that was okay.
Now, they used a liquid fuel. They did not use a gelled fuel?
Right, they never had gelled. We were the only country that did have gelled fuel. Napalm.
Okay. And part of that was there's some pressure issues, and also they had issues with the igniter, right?
Well, as you gel fuel, you make it less combustible, less easy to light.
Okay. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah, they had some real problems with their igniters. Not so much on dry land on the mainland China war, for instance. But you put them down in the jungle, paper cartridges, and all of a sudden, it works so
I'll tell you what, why don't we take a closer look at how that igniter works?
Sure, sure.
Okay. All right, so this is the business end of this thing.
Right.
Go ahead, let's pull the end off that. Let's see how this actually works. So you got a retention cap that threads on there.
Right, and we found out yesterday firing just a little bit of sand affects those threads.
Oh, I'm sure
Makes it very difficult.
So this was a pyrotechnic gun, kind of like the M2. In fact, this is probably where the U.S. got the pyrotechnic idea for the M2, right?
Yes, definitely. They copied it.
Okay. So second cap.
And again, it's wonderful. You see, these threads are much bigger. They can take a little bit of dirt, but I don't know. I don't really like that design.
So the idea here was you have a striker in this, right?
Right.
And what's kind of cool about this one is every time you actually open the valve to fire the gun, it fires off one of these caps. Oh, yeah, there we go. There we go. So our striker is right down here. Okay, go ahead and crank that handle.
And a rotator also.
Right, so it's kind of like a double action revolver. So there's the striker, and then this is a cam. And you can see, this looks just like a revolver cylinder on the back. This cam is going to cycle this one position each time. And then that striker goes through one of these basically firing pin holes. And it's going to touch off one of those paper cartridges. So in fact,
so basically we need to rotate to the next cartridge. And then we need to fire that off.
Holding it in place.
Ready?
Yep. Yeah. It needs to be at the proper depth, threaded in place.
Yeah, we probably have to put this on, make it work.
But you get the idea. This forces this thing to rotate, that firing pin.
Oh, there's actually two rotators. Look at that.
Oh, no, I think that's a lock.
A lock and a rotator, yeah.
And then, in the front here, you've got 10 spaces for paper cartridges that fit in. Now, the good news there is that they're pyrotechnic. So that's going to, I assume, well, you don't have a battery that you have to rely on, for one thing.
Right.
The downside is they're paper cartridges.
Right.
So you get away from the water vulnerability of an electric system and go to
paper.
That one step forward, two steps back, sort of.
Well, an interesting aside is that Germany, France, Italy, and Great Britain, after they'd been in the war for a little while, quickly went over from hydrogen or battery or electric all to pyrotechnic.
Okay.
Everybody was using little cartridges. So the Japanese were actually ahead of everybody in their development, probably because of the war in China.
Right. So on this one, you've got 10 shots.
Right.
Which presumably 10 shots should be more than enough to use all of your 3 gallons of fuel.
Right.
So while you've got this complex system to reload it, you probably don't have to do that. If you have to do that, you also have to refill the tanks. So it's not like it's something you have to do under fire.
Right. But I also think that there are other factors, minor factors involved, like suppose the cartridges are just damp and 1 out of 3 lights. I'm going to crank that thing 6 times and get 2 of them burning.
Okay.
And then...
So that's true. How long would these burn for?
We can only guess because the pyrotechnic mix in fireworks is the same everywhere.
Okay.
We can only guess that it's the same as the English, British, American, German. So we actually used an American mix in there. And they burn not quite as hot as the American for almost the same length of time.
Okay. So if you turned it on and then shut it off and then opened it again, you could get 2 of those burning simultaneously.
Right, exactly.
And that's going to increase the chance that it will successfully light your fuel.
Right.
I think that's something people probably don't realize is that you're not guaranteed that just because you've got something burning up here that it will effectively light the fuel.
Interestingly enough, you don't see it here, but you'll notice that the flame comes out very close to the nozzle, but there's nothing to keep it an ignition shield per se, to keep the wind from blowing and to concentrate all that heat in a small area.
Okay.
And I think
that's another area where
we'd already learned that on the M1, that we really needed to protect that and concentrate the flame.
All right.
But again, it had worked in China for a long time, and they were fine, and they didn't change it.
Okay. Let's take a look at the handle mechanism. All right, so here's our actual operating handle. And it's kind of funny, this works backwards of what we would expect in the US. It's currently in the off position. And to engage it, you pop it open like that, and that would be on and flowing.
Right.
And then on the bottom of this assembly, you've got this big long connecting rod. This rod goes up to that rotating firing mechanism that we just saw. But this has a couple of the problems. I talked about this in our M2 video. The valve is actually back here. So even after you shut it off, this whole hose is full of fuel that's going to dribble out.
Yes, dribble's the proper term.
So you need to be cognizant of that. And, you know, like when you finish firing, make sure you dump it clear of yourself.
We actually got one of the cartridges to short by letting diesel fuel drip on it.
Oh, yeah, that's another problem.
That was a problem. We had to change over to another cartridge.
The other issue here is, you'll see this thing is still on. My hand's nowhere near it. But if this were hooked up and operating, it would be spewing flaming fuel right now.
Right.
The US gun, if you let go of the handle, it shuts off automatically. It's spring-loaded. This one, I can easily imagine, if you've got an operator who's charging a pillbox, he opens up to fire, gets hit, he's going to go down, and he's going to wave this wand, who knows where, if he's dead or wounded, and it's just going to keep firing until it's out of fuel, which is... That's not going to make a lot of people want to be right next to him. And it just seems like, now you used it, obviously, I haven't, but it seems like it's a very awkward weapon to use.
You get used to it, but still, there's too many little problems.
All right, so that's the igniter. Now, if we're going to assemble this whole thing into a working piece, we've got, of course, we've got the wand / gun, we've got the hose, we've got the tanks.
Right.
The US one goes together pretty easily.
Right. It's got a cam lock right off the tank here, so you don't have a cap to lose. Losing caps is a big deal.
Yeah.
And this requires a wrench.
Okay. So
it's a pretty good size heavy wrench.
This has no safety chain, nothing.
It's going to get lost.
Okay. And having occasionally been on a shooting range, stuff kind of falls in the dirt sometimes.
Right.
I can see it being really easy to drop that in some very fine volcanic sand.
So what improvement could we have? And the answer could be, let's put a cam type and let's put a lever cam system that requires nothing, not even a screwdriver.
And then it's the same deal at that end. It's another threaded connection.
Well, then let's just put it on there and leave it on there and have a way to pack the gun with the hose attached.
Okay.
And that was basically, the unit's ready to go with just camming this, plugging this in, put a new igniter in, fill up the pressure bottle, fill up the fuel, ready to go.
Okay.
We did, I think we did the M2 the third time in less than 2 minutes alone.
Yeah. It's just quick and easy once you get the hang of it.
This, no, you got to go get that big wrench. It's awkward. It likes to tip over while you're working on it.
Yeah.
The frame only adds just, not a half a pound.
Right. It's a nice low profile frame, really.
And yet it allows us to work on it without it tipping over.
Right.
So I see a lot of improvements and quite a few copies.
Okay. One last thing that we didn't talk about with the straps, but it's just this cool little feature, is the Japanese soldiers, I don't know how much of this is stereotype, but they were very big people. And they were using these guns, we often think of Japanese World War II as being exclusively in the, these jungle Pacific Islands.
Right.
They did an awful lot of fighting in China and in Korea,
World War II,
where it's really cold. And so if you were in your thick winter coat, you've got this nice long strap to use. And if you're not, if you're in a jungle uniform, it just wraps once right around this center bar, and you've got it tightened up significantly. And then you've still got all of your adjustment holes.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Just That's one of those clever little features.
That little tiny, you know, you could...
Yep. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, they were, what, 110-pound average infantrymen?
Honestly, I don't know. I ought to look that up sometime to find out what's true and what's really hyperbole. Or
they're efficient.
Yeah. No. All right. Well, I think it's pretty cool to look at. I think people would like to see it fired. Mm-hmm. So yesterday we in fact took it out, filled it up, and we got you firing it. This case, I shot the M2. You shot this one.
We don't have the service record. Remember, from 1945 to when this was fired, 2005, I think, there were no Japanese flamethrowers ever fired. We have no record of hydro testing. We have no record of maintenance. We have nothing. So we're not to the point where it's comfortable to let someone fire it. I think we have to stick with just one person for a while.
And this firing mechanism is a lot less user-friendly.
Yeah, and I really don't trust Japanese. I mean, it was good technology, but we're not familiar with it. We don't have the records. We don't have the testing. We don't have the history. We don't have any info on it.
You've got really extensive experience with a wide variety of flamethrowers that translates into being able to use something like this safely.
Right.
Some drooling idiot novice like me, not so much.
Now, brand new material, never seen water, fuel, or anything inside, and the paint is flawless. And then hydroing it
so you tested
to 600 psi and never filling this to more than 450. I don't really have a safety issue other than the fact that we did find some leaks, but you know, and again, we just don't have the information or the parts available. Yeah. Everything has to be made.
So real quick, because I forgot to mention this, this has a really cool backstory to it. This specific unit.
Yeah.
Basically, straight off the shelf, never issued from the Tokyo Arsenal to New York in a museum for a while, and then ultimately sold and fell into your grubby hands.
Right. So we have the paperwork by, let's see, a destroyer escort Coast Guard commander. Went right to the Arsenal and said, I want a brand new one. Give me the figures. He wrote the pressure here. He wrote the pressure here. He said, give me the charging manuals. Give me that new gauge.
And this was
give me the box that this goes in.
1946?
1940, 46, late 45. We're not sure.
So it's the occupation period.
Right. Then there was a magazine article on his ship and what they did. So he was post-war in Tokyo Harbor. Came back to the United States. We actually have the box and the shipping tags from his house through the Long Island Railroad to the museum, and then the museum went to auction with it, and it was picked up, and it still had never been fired.
Wow. Well, it's a mystery to most people. If it shows up at my door, I'm not going to fire it without taking it to someone like you who knows how these things work.
Don't fire any flamethrower without having it tested.
Don't eat candy off the ground, and don't fire random flamethrowers.
Yeah, right.
So we'll take a look at the box in a moment. It's cool. It's got the dipstick. It's got all the original, the inventory packing list, and that's just a really cool accessory to have with this.
Yeah, they really took care of their equipment.
All right, now people are all pissed because I said we were going to shoot it. And went on talking more. So why don't we take a look at you shooting this?
Okay.
Ready? Yep. Yep. Well, that was pretty cool. We got one full firing out of it. You know, like you said, this one, it needs to be overhauled again at this point. It's got a few little leaks, and the M2, when we shot it, was just flawless. It was fill it up, drain it out, fill it up, repeat, have fun. This one takes a little more care and practice.
More difficult, more time-consuming, and I don't see the quality of their gaskets lasting very long.
Yeah. However, we got one full-length firing out of it,
Good
and you can really see how that range decreases because it doesn't have a pressure regulator.
Right,
So.
and literally, this is the third time since World War II this thing's been fired. Any flamethrower Japanese has been fired.
Right.
So the only one in existence that works.
So, very cool. Well, thank you very much for bringing this down so we can take a look at it.
My pleasure.
Much less actually go out and watch it shoot. That was really cool.
Fun.
So, of course, if you guys have any of your flamethrower needs, whether they are a new purchase, restoration, parts, or just cool information, check out his book, published by Schiffer, and also his website. That's Charlie Hobson at flamethrowerexpert.com. And, of course, tune back into ForgottenWeapons.com for more cool flamethrower videos. Thanks for watching.
Touch.
So something else really cool about this particular Japanese flamethrower is that Coast Guard guy, captain who brought it back with all of the original accessories, including this original transit case. It's even still got the original paint up here, designating it as a Type 100 flamethrower. The strap is reproduction, but kind of cool. They had these strap bars on both sides of it, so you can sling it over your shoulder to carry. And then let's go ahead and open
Before
this
you
up.
do that, there's a tag underneath that's pristine.
Okay.
There's the Long Island Railroad.
Yeah.
Totally legible and absolutely perfect shape.
To the Waterloo Historical Society Public Library.
There you go. And here's our commander, navigation, Coast Guard, I can't tell you, and then some of the dates.
Okay. Sweet. Total, 100% provenance on this thing. It's pretty cool. Pop that open.
Really works nice. Oh, look at that.
Then, inside, we've got, up here, this is actually the inventory list.
Right.
So it's one each of these items. And then this is the mark of the Tokyo Arsenal, right?
Right.
So it's going to indicate, because
these parts were made there.
Right. There could have been other manufacturers.
Right. There's, we could tell, wand, hose.
Yeah. And then inside, you've got storage for the hose, the wand, a dipstick for checking the fuel level in the gun.
Right.
And then there's a spare ignition cartridge cylinder. Right. I don't know if it would have originally had an extra piece of something to hold it in place. But you'd have this, and then I presume you'd probably carry the tanks on your back for transit.
There might have been another box that got lost. I think this is, we're guessing, but we think this is the repacking instructions because they would have changed as they upgraded the model.
Okay.
So my guess is, first thing you do is wash off the hose. The second thing you do it, that type of thing. We may have even copied that because our M2 came in a waterproof box, including the tanks, and it had just exactly the same thing as this.
Huh.
It had the lubrication chart and the list of materials.